Rising Zan the Samurai Gunman quite frankly has to be one of the weirdest games I've played in a while. It takes various elements from both Japanese and Western culture, with the player finding themselves within a world inhabited by samurai, ninjas and cowboys. Gameplay is the real star of the show, with Zan possessing a whole range of ways in which to take on each situation, may that be the trusty revolver or the unforgiving katana. Combining both with several power-ups is central to overcoming the obstacles the game throws at you, the most testing being the various boss encounters, which are a true highlight and let the gameplay shine. With 10 levels in total, it's not the longest of games, but for what it offers, Rising Zan the Samurai Gunman is a surprisingly good experience that is bound to satisfy hack and slash fans as well as those looking for something unique. Hilarion is another spin on the popular Resident Evil formula and presents players with a bleak and at times psychotic experience. There are two main characters known as Rion and Lilia, with the player primarily taking control of Rion, who wakes in a hospital without any knowledge of his past. He is injected with experimental drugs that grant him various abilities such as telekinesis and setting enemies on fire. In order to harness these skills throughout the adventure, you must consistently pop pills or inject yourself to refill your stock. It's all pretty disturbing, to be fair. Couple this with the strange environments and you have an experience that is bound to stick with you. As I mentioned, it lends a lot from Resident Evil, so you can expect to find yourself solving puzzles, locating items and reading notes that all manage to give further context to your surroundings as well as the events that take place. Now Hilarion isn't perfect, but it does achieve what it sets out to do and is bound to absorb you within its dark and grisly world. Guardian's Crusade is an incredibly heartwarming and compelling experience. The somewhat comical visuals may have the potential to put some players off, but if you can look past the more archaic nature of the several aspects that make up the game, you'll find something that is absolutely teeming with life and charm. Essentially an RPG, the player assumes the role of a young boy whose job it is to return a baby to its mother. You'll come to learn several new abilities in which to help you along the way, as well as meet a lovable cast of characters that manage to add a further weight to the world. Now the real standout aspect though has to be the various boss encounters you'll find yourself running into. They offer up some of the more challenging situations in which you have to overcome, and as a result become one of the major highlights of the overall experience. Battles play out in a turn-based fashion and offer the player many ways in which to tackle each enemy. Standard attacks, elemental abilities, there are many options, allowing you to approach each encounter in your own style. If you're a fan of RPGs, Guardian's Crusade is a must. Jumping Flash began life as a tech demo in which to showcase the power of Sony's first home console. The game takes place from a first-person perspective and tasks players with navigating a gigantic robot rabbit around a variety of levels by simply jumping from one platform to the next. Now let's get the obvious out of the way, it's not exactly a looker, but that doesn't take away from what Jumping Flash gets right, and that's its gameplay. Each level is essentially a floating island that possesses layer upon layer of platforms and grants the player the ability to triple jump and defend themselves for the use of lasers. The sheer level of height you'll be reaching provides a true sense of exhilaration and verticality that at times could have the potential to make you feel quite lightheaded. One standout aspect that will become apparent has to be the soundtrack, which in all honesty packs a serious punch and blends seamlessly with the on-screen action, resulting in a truly engaging experience. Don't let the aging visuals fool you. Jumping Flash well and truly deserves a playthrough. Team Buddies is an experience that takes many aspects from RTS and shoot-'em-up games in order to create something entirely unique. The main goal is to locate and acquire several crates scattered on the map and bring them back to your base and use them to build weapons in which to level your enemies. Weapons range from Uzis and time bombs to rocket launchers and plasma rifles, but it's not only weapons which can be crafted. Several vehicles as well as buddies can also be created to help you in the fight. Each have their own special ability, so there is a huge amount of options open to the player when it comes to taking on an opponent. It's a recipe for complete mayhem, and add to this the several modes of play, and what you have is a seriously addictive party game that is perfect to play with friends. Team Buddies has to be one of the most original and enjoyable games ever released on PS1, so if you've yet to try it out for yourself, now is the perfect time. The PlayStation 1 is no stranger to snowboarding games. With the likes of Cool Boarders and the MTV Sports series, there are plenty of options, but one that often gets overlooked has to be Trippen Snowboarder. It is the second in a series of games that began life in the arcades, and as you would expect, sees the player hitting the slopes in order to gain insanely high scores and topple their rivals. Gameplay is relatively simple. There are separate buttons for jumping, grabs and flips, which make pulling off tricks all the more easier. But what makes Trippen Snowboarder stand out though is the sheer amount of content that is included. For starters, several hidden characters make the cut, with the likes of Leon Kennedy and Claire Redfield leaving their zombie-ridden lives behind in order to catch them in. Although not the best snowboarding game on the system by any means, Trippen Snowboarder still offers up a great time and should not be passed up if you come across it. If you're a fan of shows such as Voltron or Macross, Gappy Axe will be right up your street. It's essentially a side-scrolling shooter which mixes colourful sprites and polygon-based characters with downright addictive and engaging gameplay. There's a whole ton of options in your arsenal when it comes to taking on each stage, the first being a standard charge weapon and the latter more of an assist tool that allows you to deal with greater amounts of enemies at any one time. Out of the 6 different machines you'll find yourself piloting, each also possess a special move which is subject to a power gauge that fills throughout each level. Upon releasing it, it can instantly obliterate everything in its path. Now, no shooter would be complete without a series of deeply challenging bosses, and Gappy Axe does not disappoint. Each requires you to figure out their movements and attack patterns in order to overcome. Gappy Axe well and truly deserves a place in anyone's collection. There's never been a better time than now to try it out for yourself. Journey West shares much in common with the likes of Final Fantasy Tactics and presents the player with a strategic turn-based RPG. Very much like Tactics, you'll find yourself coming into contact with a whole range of characters that can all bring their own distinct advantages to your team whilst out in the field. Battles play out in a turn-based fashion, with movement being assigned to a grid. The various spells, attacks and abilities you will learn over the course of the adventure all have their role to play during battle and can turn the tide in an instant. You'll constantly be learning new things and incorporating them into your strategy as you take on enemy after enemy. Although not the best strategic RPG on the system by any means, Journey West still offers a great take on the genre, and with a wide range of optional and side content included as well, there is surely enough to keep you satisfied throughout the duration of the journey. So if you never got round to trying it out for yourself back in the day, now is the perfect time to jump in. Samurai Deeper is a 2D fighting game based on the popular anime show of the same name. Released well into the PlayStation's life cycle in 2002, it also saw a release on the Game Boy Advance. Now, as you would expect, there are several characters in which to choose from, each with their own unique special abilities, weapons and movesets that make playing through each in order to find one that suits you best essential. Aiding you in the fight is support characters that, through the use of a gauge which is filled during combat, can help turn the tide of each battle in your favour. Now, there's a ton of great fighters for the PS1, but many may have skipped past this one due to its late release and the fact that it never found its way out of Japan. So if you're looking for a new fighting game on the system and have exhausted the usual options, Samurai Deeper will offer up an experience that is bound to satisfy the need. Square are well known for the various RPGs they developed during the 32-bit era, but not all of them were a huge success. A lesser-known title by the name of Brave Fencer Musashi sees players taking up the fight as a blue-haired boy, essentially an action RPG. The gameplay is quite straightforward and sees various RPG elements take center stage. Hit points, spells, various weapons, and looking after your day-to-day health all have a role to play when it comes to your effectiveness within the world. If you don't sleep enough, your ability to tackle situations will diminish, as your combat abilities will slowly start to degrade. Speaking of combat, there are several options open to the player when encountering enemies. Musashi comes to possess 2 swords, which each have differing abilities and effects. The first, known as Fusion, focuses upon rapid combos, with the second, known as Lumina, primarily allowing the use of magic. Using the 2 in conjunction is key to your success, especially later into the journey. If Brave Fencer Musashi passed you by back in the day, it is an RPG that well and truly deserves a go. Well, that does it for today's video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to click subscribe to be notified of videos in the future.